Welcome to What's on the Ballot. This episode will cover the Medfield Annual Town Election. This election will be held on Monday, March 29th, 2021. Polls will be open in the center from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. The positions that will be on the ballot are Select Board, Town Clerk, Moderator, Assessor, School Committee, Library Trustee, Park Commissioner, Housing Authority Planning Board, and the Trust Fund Commissioner. The only contended race is for the position of the School Committee. We have interviews with some of the candidates running that were conducted by Brett Poirier, Executive Director of Medfield TV. First up is Osler Peterson for Select Board. He is the current chair of the Select Board and is running for re-election. Here is his interview.
If you could just briefly describe what the Board of Selectmen does in the town.
So the Board of Selectmen is actually charged with operating the town side of the government in Medfield. The government is basically divided between the school side and the town side. The schools are run by the school committee and the superintendent, and so the selectmen have no authority over that side of the town. The other parts of the town are by statute, I guess, technically run by the Board of Selectmen. The reality is that the Board of Selectmen hires the town administrator and the assistant town administrator and all of their team to actually run the town on a day-to-day basis. But the selectmen are legally charged with being the executives of the town. We don't function that way, but the buck stops with us, I guess. But we have Christine and Nick and their team to actually run the day-to-day operation of the town.
You know, doing your job obviously is one where I think you probably have a lot of proud moments, a lot of things that you can be proud of as you look back at your time as selectman. But what are some of the moments that you look back on now that are some of the things that you're most proud of?
So one of the reasons that I ran for selectman in the first instance was that I had an issue that involved the Board of Selectmen and I needed to deal with them. And I found it kind of frustrating to deal with them because in those days you couldn't figure out when the selectmen even met, and you couldn't find out what was on their agendas. And so that I thought that the process could be helped by institutionalizing some of those things, so that when I first became chair of the Board of Selectmen, and the way the chair of the Select Board works is that it just rotates around between the three Select Board members. And so the first time I became chair of the board, I instituted a policy that we would meet on the first and third Tuesdays of the month. And fortunately, the following chairs of the Select Board have just stuck with that. And so that's become institutionalized at this point as the typical meeting dates for the Select Board. Before that, it was just kind of, it was set on a ad hoc basis, basically. Another thing that as I said, that I found frustrating was that I couldn't figure out what the Select Board was doing. And so that one of the changes that I instituted was having the agendas of the Select Board be circulated on the Friday before the Tuesday meetings. And that was, we did that to a certain extent. And then finally, the state passed an amendment to the open meeting law, which made it mandatory. And then after that, we were more religious about doing it. But so, I mean, that's the sort of institutionalization of good practices that I was looking to have happen. When I was a new selectman, I was on the capital budget committee, and people would come in and give us their budget, capital budget items for the next year. But it was only a 1-year process. And I suggested that we make that that people have a 5-year horizon and tell us what you need for the next 5 years. And so that's finally been adopted and is happening. Jerry McCarthy, who was the former facilities manager, actually did a huge task of putting together a 20-year facilities plan for maintenance for all of the town buildings, or almost all of the town buildings, so that we have that on the shelf as the start of a much longer term process of planning expenditures for the town. So that just that sort of greater planning for the process of the town. I mean, that's been one of the things that I've really been wanting to work on all of the time is transparency of what's the select board is aware of. That's why I have a blog, because I see a lot of information as a select board member that that the people in the town don't see. So I just try to pass it along as I see it. And then just sort of running the town on a more professional and a more systematic basis. I guess those have been the things that I've really been trying to do. And then there along the way, there's certain things that have happened that stand out for me. One of them was when I was angsting at one point over climate change and the fact that I was concerned that the federal government and the state government wasn't doing enough, and I thought, well, Medfield should be doing more. And the people who had and so I just had a sort of a general feeling of angst about that, and I reached out to people who had run the showing of the movie An Inconvenient Truth in town that had happened just slightly before that. And I met with them, and then from that meeting, the Energy Committee was born, which has been just a huge savings for the town. I mean, I think that Mike Sullivan used to say that the Energy Committee cut the town's energy use by 40%. I think it was. I mean, it's a huge dollar savings per year. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars a year of savings. The Energy Committee is hugely active at the moment in terms of its work on the Medfield State Hospital potential development. There's a meeting tomorrow night of the select board dealing with the RFP, and the Energy Committee has had huge suggestions about that, because there's a centralized distribution system already set up there for this, what was the steam heat system. When the state ran it, they had a power plant and they heated all the buildings from the one power plant. So that actually sort of offers an opportunity for any developer of the site to maybe do geothermal heat.
Wow.
And distribute it through those existing tunnels to all of the buildings. All the buildings are connected through that tunnel system for the steam. So the Energy Committee's had huge impact, I think, on the town in the 10 years or so that it's existed. So that was a sort of that's one of those things that I'm very proud of, certainly having been involved in getting that moving.
That's awesome. You know, you're a part of so many different groups too in town. There's not just one thing that you kind of have your hands on. I feel like as a select person, you're all over the place. And I know that you personally are involved in a lot of different committees, ones that I've covered or been a part of, but I always see you getting involved and helping out wherever you can. So it must be hard for you to actually pick the proudest moment too. So, but I appreciate that. I appreciate how much you've been involved in the town. It's really impressive to see.
Well, I think that's one of the things that you sign up for when you offer to the town to be on the Board of Selectmen. Part of what you're doing is agreeing to go to a lot of meetings and to take part in a lot of different things that are happening in town. I'm very fortunate now to have two colleagues on the select board who have come to the select board from the warrant committee, so they're very well versed in the finances of the town, way better versed in that than I am. And so that we're working on institutionalizing a lot of the spending practices that make a lot of sense in terms of getting the town on a solid financial basis going forward. I mean, there are things like the OPEB, where the town promised its employees that the town for years would pay for their retirement pension and their health insurance, but never set aside any money for that. So basically all of that, I think it's around 40 million now, 42 million, 38 million, something in that range of obligations that the town has to these former employees that it's going to come due in the future, that we didn't tax ourselves enough on in the past to put that money aside. And now we've got this obligation that the current residents will have to pick up and pay for because the past residents didn't pay for it on their property tax. So now we're catching up. But that's the sort of, and we're not just Medfield. Most of the towns in the state and the state itself didn't do that. So, but it's that sort of setting aside the money for the real expenditures of what you're committing the town to, so that we're not playing catch up in the future.
And I know you're probably, as a select person, especially, of course, this year, especially, things are changing day to day. But if you look forward into 2021 and beyond, what are some of the things that you're looking most forward to accomplishing?
Well, number one is getting the town through the virus. And I think that Chris and her team have done an excellent job of leading that. The Board of Health, I think, has done a phenomenal job for the town in terms of charting a course through the pandemic. It's just who knew that it was going to be this sort of disruption to our town, our world. I think that the other things that I'm thinking are coming down the road are more of the financial issues of getting the town's finances more systematized, more institutionalized. We've started to set aside money to do all of those repairs and maintenance on the town buildings that weren't in the past planned for. That we would just find that we needed a new roof, and so we would somehow find money at an annual town meeting to replace a roof. Well, the reality is that we know the roofs are going to need to be replaced on a certain schedule, and that's the kind of schedule that Jerry McCarty put into that 20-year plan for our town buildings. And so that, I mean, we should be planning for those expenses. And so that's what we started to do.
Up next on the ballot is the town clerk position, for which Marion Bonoldi is running. Marion is currently our assistant town clerk, and here is her interview.
The town clerk's office is very multifaceted. There are many jobs of the town clerk that all have specific details to them. The elections, for the town clerk's main job is to run accurate, execute elections. In terms of that, there's also voting registration. There's party enrollment. There's nomination papers that need to be processed for the elections. Any aspect of the election is handled in the town clerk's office, communicating with the Secretary of the Commonwealth, and furthermore. The town clerk is also the keeper of the records, so they handle all the vital statistics of the town, which is births, deaths, marriages. The town clerk handles the census. The town clerk does licensing in the town. The town clerk works with all the other departments, whether it's planning and zoning to process of decisions, whether it's conservation, which is to process those decisions. So there's many different facets to the town clerk in order to keep that piece, the paperwork piece, the keeper of the records piece of the town government running. So I was hired by the town hall 3 years ago. I was brought in to work with Sarah Raposa, who is the town planner. And Sarah has her hands in everything. So I came in as her assistant. She runs many, many committees, whether it's planning board, zoning board of appeals, affordable housing trust. She has handled everything that has had to do with the state hospital, townwide master planning committee. So I was brought in as the recording clerk, which was I attended all those meetings and I took minutes of all of those meetings, and also worked with Sarah and learned from Sarah and became her assistant in terms of processing paperwork and things of that nature. So I was approached in January of 2020 when the former town clerk announced her retirement and she was leaving midterm. So the town of Medfield was getting ready to go into this election season of 2020, and the town administrator, Christine Treeweiler, and the Board of Selectmen asked me to be appointed as the town clerk. So that's how I came into the assistant town clerk position. And at that time, they hired James Mullen, who is the interim town clerk for Medfield, and he's been here for a year. He has worked as a town clerk for many years for the town of Milton, and he's also worked in 9 different towns throughout the Commonwealth doing exactly this, which is filling in the gaps of when other town clerks leave midterm. So I came in that way. At the time, we did not know. I knew that there was going to be a busy season. I knew that we were going to have 2 primaries, an annual town meeting, town election, and obviously the presidential. We did not know that there was going to be a pandemic that was going to happen on top of all of this. And for the legislation to change so much in terms of the vote by mail, to make things a little bit more challenging in terms of making sure these elections happened accurately and were executed properly, on top of making sure all the other aspects of the town clerk's job were done. So I also am a notary, became a justice of the peace, things like that. So it's been busy. Well, there's been such a huge learning curve. When I think about that in January of 2020, I didn't really understand at that point the functions of the town clerk office. So it's been a big opportunity and a lot of education in the past year. The biggest accomplishments were the accuracy of those elections and that we got them done properly and accurately for the residents and for the town of Medfield, and to be working with James Mullen and having that network and having that understanding of how, been there, done that situation. There wasn't anything that got thrown at us that James didn't have the answer for. So just to be in that, bubble of learning environment was something that a lot of people don't get. But the whole year was really an accomplishment for me. I'm looking forward to, building off the foundation that the former town clerk left. I'm looking forward to, working with the residents. The town clerk is a very special position, in my opinion, because it's the one elected office that has town hall hours, that the residents can come in. I'm their elected official. I'm there to listen. I might not have the answer, but I can certainly direct and guide as to where we need to go from there. I'm looking for the accessibility to just evolve a little bit more with the residents and with the other departments. And I'm looking to maybe modernize some things to kind of, pull the town clerk's office a little bit more into where technology and computers and things like that can even strengthen the organization that has such a good foundation already. But there's a lot of things that I'm looking forward to in running in the town clerk's office. But being there for the residents is the main thing, and being there when the town hall's open.
Next up are the school committee candidates. On the ballot is incumbent Leo Brehm, Lauren Liljegren, and Robert Worth. We asked each of them to answer the question, why should a Medfield resident vote for you? Here are their responses.
Well, I'm extremely committed to education, and particularly public education. It is a cornerstone of our democracy. It is what makes America, America. I've been very fortunate to work in a capacity in education that I'm extremely passionate and feel fulfilled by. So I think that people can be rest assured that I have their children's education first in my heart, and I want the best for the Medfield community. Medfield's a great community, and I know that it's been a little bumpy through this pandemic because people are very passionate about it, and I think there's been a lot of loud voices, but I think those loud voices just represent how passionate they are about Medfield as a community and how important the schools are to the fabric of a community. They are, a pillar within the community. The schools are centers of not just learning, but of interaction with community members altogether. So, any voter can rest assured that that's going to be paramount in my decision making, is building the best school district for our kids and for the Medfield community at large. Thank you very much for your support for our schools. I think that, again, one of the things that the community needs to hear is that the schools belong to the entire community, and we do really appreciate those who don't even have kids in the schools continuing to support our schools, because it's really important. So thank you very much.
It comes up a lot that I don't have a background in education. I think that's a positive. I come to the table with a strong business background, but I'm an advocate for the taxpayers. My number one purpose will be to serve the interests of the community. The Medfield Teachers Association does a fantastic job advocating on behalf of its membership. My role on school committee will be to serve the interests of my community, the taxpayers, the citizens, the families of Medfield.
As we return from the pandemic, I do think that my experience working in schools every day and really being on the ground and encountering those unexpected situations will help me as a school committee member in thinking about what that next 2-3 years looks like in that first term as school committee if I'm elected. Beyond that, I think that I bring a lot of value to the school community and the school committee, thinking about how to work with teachers and teachers unions. I have experience as a teacher. I have experience being part of a teachers union. I also have experience negotiating with teachers unions and really thinking about what's best for students and working with teachers to achieve that. That's some of the value that I bring to the school community. I think about the new Dale Street project and the opinions that people have about that and how that will be kind of evolving as we look at it over the next few years as we go into the building process and the final decision-making process. I have experience working in 2 schools that are on the same campus, very similar to the proposed project and the way that the schools will be divided, but also on the same campus and providing students access to different opportunities and community engagement through that one campus model. And I have that experience right now. I work between 2 buildings every day. They're 150 feet apart, and my position really exists because of the fact that we have one campus. So I bring that experience as we think about how to staff those buildings, how students will transition from one school to the next, and kind of how that will look different from how it's looked in the past with the schools possibly being so close to one another. I bring some of that experience as well.
The full interviews with the school committee candidates are available on our show, Meet the Candidates. We conducted full-length introductory interviews with each of them. Then we did follow-up interviews in which they reacted to each other's statements from the first round, as well as answered questions from the public via Medfield TV's Facebook page. You can view the full interviews on our watch page, medfield.tv/watch, or on our YouTube channel, Medfield TV. The final interview that was conducted is with Mike Pastore, who is running for Trust Fund Commissioner.
What does a trust fund commissioner do?
It's a great question, Brett. Thank you for asking. So the town actually has a number of trust funds on its balance sheet that are they're earmarked towards very specific things, and they're all run by the treasurer tax collector office, Georgia Kalivas, who does a fantastic job. There is one trust fund, however, and that's this one. It's called the Municipal Buildings Insurance Trust Fund, and it's the only trust fund in town that is required to have commissioners that are voted, and there's a group of 3 commissioners, and the timing for their elections are staggered. I think there's one that's a 1-year term, and 2 3-year terms. And so the position I'm running for would be a 3-year term. And what this trust fund does is it covers expenditures to municipal buildings or property that's been damaged. So not the most exciting of the various trust funds we have in town, but still very important. There's my understanding is the end balance as of December of this past year was about 300,000, and the commissioners meet roughly once a year to go over how much is in the account and are there any expenditures that we need to approve.
Mike, you're a fairly new resident to Medfield, someone who came in a couple of years, but you've been heavily involved in the town. You've been on the warrant committee. You're on the Medfield TV board of directors as well. Why
My
run?
favorite committee.
Yeah, it's the free dinner, right? It gets it every time.
Absolutely.
But why the trust fund commission?
So actually, it's funny. I mean, I think July 1st, I will, me and my family will have been here 6 years. So it's gone by really quick. I'm certainly not a not a grizzled veteran as many Medfielders are, but I mean, you and I have had this conversation before, Brett. I mean, this is a town that from day one I just felt in my heart, and really. The community's been great to me and my family, and it didn't take long for me to want to give back right away and to be part of the community. Now, as you also know, that was that was put the timeline was quickened a little bit when I ran for selectman, after being here for just a year. And one of the byproducts of, running that campaign and meeting a lot of people, and, it was a really positive experience. But as we know, I think I got lapped by Gus Murby. I think it would be 2 of my voting totals plus 6 to get to his. But one of the byproducts of running a positive campaign is now everyone that didn't vote for me wanted me to be involved in their committee. So I got involved in a lot of different things that way. And the warrant committee, I had been on for 3 years. I was chair for 2 years. And in my experience with the warrant committee, you really, from day one on that committee, you realize how much goes into the town's budget, and how complicated it all is, and there are so many moving parts, and this trust fund is a small piece of that, but it is one of those moving parts. And so when I stepped down from the warrant committee in October, I still wanted to be involved, in any way, that made sense for my experience and skill set. And I think, my experience with the warrant committee help as, as a trust fund commissioner. And it turned out that there was an open seat, so I'm not going to get lapped by anyone unless there's a vicious write-in campaign at the last minute.
Absolutely. And then the final question we have for you today is, what are the things that you're looking forward to accomplishing if you do? I should say if you do, but the chances are that we're going to see you as the trust fund commissioner.
I mean, Brett, it's 2020 taught us anything. It's that
it's a wild world.
Is really possible, yeah. So, I mean, what I really, want to accomplish here is just, make sure that the, books are accurate. And, Georgia Kalivas, who's, I mentioned, is in charge of the various trust funds. She is also a trust fund commissioner. So I know that, she runs a tight ship, and she knows every penny in and every penny out. So I mostly just want to want to support what's already been done, and of course any expenditure requests that come in, just make sure it's the best thing for the town.
Also on the ballot is Scott McDermott, who is running for re-election to the town moderator position. Running for assessor is Michael Rose, and campaigning as a write-in is Thomas Sweeney, who has a full interview with Medfield TV available on our watch page, medfield.tv/watch, or our YouTube channel, Medfield TV. Continuing with positions on the ballot, next is the library trustee position, which is a vote for 2 ballot items. Jessica Raza and Kirsten Cole are running for these positions. There is also the housing authority position, for which Lisa Donovan is running. And then there are 2 positions on the planning board. Sarah Lemke is running for a 5-year term, and Seth Meehan is running for a 2-year term. Be sure to vote in the Medfield Annual Town Election on March 29, 2021. Polls will be open at the center from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. You can find voting information and more on the town website, town.medfield.net. Thanks for tuning into this episode of What's on the Ballot, brought to you by Medfield TV.